This is Jonathan Lane from Fan Film Factor, and today I am here with Kenny Smith and Zeke Flatten of the long-awaited Star Trek First Frontier, which is going to be coming out, hopefully, on Tuesday, the 8th of September.
There's no hopefully.
No, you guys are absolutely doing it. Well, you listeners, I want you to know, it is September 6th. It is Sunday morning. We actually had to delay this call for an hour because these two guys were up all night working on finishing Star Trek First Frontier. You guys are cutting it close.
That's how it is, though. It's exciting this way.
Well, I mean, right now it's just a lot of fixes, and we're going through the final mix, and we're making sure things are synced up, and we're getting, the final color grading and touches back and forth done. But, yeah, we are cutting close. I mean, this is down to the wire. But a couple months ago, probably about 4 or 5 months ago, we set the 54th anniversary of Star Trek as the release date. And it's been a crunch. And down to the last minute, probably it's going to still be a crunch. But we're releasing at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday.
Tuesday. Mm-hmm. Original air date. It is. Where the Man Trap aired at 8:30 p.m. on September 8th, 1966. And we're going to hit 8:30. We're going to release the link at 8:30 p.m. on September 8th, just to follow the continuity of Star Trek. I can't think of a better time.
No, it's as good a time as any, although there might have been a better time, because I talked to Kenny last year. You may remember this. I'm going to take you back in time.
Many years have gone by, Jonathan. Many years.
Many years. Our first interview was actually 2017. You guys have been working on this since 2015. But I just wanted to let you folks know that I think it was very, very early on in 2019 that I made a suggestion for Kenny, because at that point you were almost ready. And we were going to
release it with limited visuals because we were having so much trouble with the visual effects.
And in fact, I had suggested that you release it on April 1st, because Robert April was the first captain of the Starship Enterprise. So April 1st. And you love that idea. And that was 2019. Now, it is 2020. What happened? Why didn't you release it a year and a half ago?
There's one answer to that, and that is Ken Stewart. He's a visual effects artist that I found at the very last second on YouTube when I posted the trailer. We were going to release last year because we had so much trouble with visual effects. It was getting to the point where we didn't know if we would be able to finish this ever, because we couldn't find anyone talented enough or who could stick with it long enough to do it. And then I was looking on YouTube under the comments of the commercial, the trailer we had released, and a visual effects artist had posted just a small little comment and said, if you need any help, I see some places I can fix it up. And I had had some experiences where I had found people that way on YouTube before, a couple, and they didn't work out. So it was taking a lot of my time to train the person to do the job. And then if they didn't do it, I was losing that time. So to start over with another person, I actually left his link. I didn't click it. And then I thought in my head, wait, what if that was somebody who really could help and I passed him right by? So I went back and clicked it, and that was exactly what it was. He had some skill in visual effects artistry. He had worked for Industrial Light and Magic and Weta and a few of the big Marvel movies he's worked on. And his suggestion was that we delay for a year, give him a year to do the movie, and then he said the visuals would be much updated over what they were. And, I mean, it was appealing. I just didn't know if he was going to pull through. But he is the one that told me to delay that 1 year. And when he did that, we waited that year, and that's when we found Sam. If I hadn't waited for that time, I would have probably released on April last year. It sounded good. And I tell you, anything that had release at the end of it sounded good to me, because I was just ready to let the world see it. I was hoping then that they could overlook the visuals and see the story that we were trying to get to them. I knew the story was strong enough to do that, but still, it's not as fun when you know, a piece of green screen or something that pulls you out of the movie. And it was a little bit disappointing to do that.
And I did see the previous version of this, and the effects did look great. I mean, the Enterprise looked fantastic. But you're right.
That was the miniature.
There was a little bit of green screen halo around some stuff. Things were a little bit dark in places. Now, you said that this ILM fellow that you talked to told you to delay it a year, but then you said, then I found Sam. So who brought you home? Who worked on it for the last year? What happened there?
Ken started to work on a trailer for us. I think it was right away, if I remember correctly. He started to work on a trailer for us, and he got busy, and it was almost going to turn into where we were going to not have him as much as we thought. And I was talking to Alec Peters from Axanar, and he was going to take the sets. And I said, look, you can have the sets if you just give me a VFX artist. That's all I needed in my whole life. And he said, well, I got this guy, Sam
VFX artist. My set.
You can have every set I've ever built. You can have the real Enterprise if I had it. Just give me a VFX artist. Somebody who can finish this movie. And he sent us to Sam. Once we had Sam doing what Sam was doing.
And Sam, by the way, is Samuel Cocking, the Harry Potter of VFX for fan films. You know, he has done, you name a fan film, he's probably worked on it. So Samuel Cockings, you contacted Sam, and Sam said what?
He said, oh, wow. He had heard about First Frontier, but there was a random phone call out of nowhere. But he was super excited about it. And then once he started, then Ken was able to take that back seat that he needed to take and do what he can do. But he did supply us with some visual effects. He did certain shots. But instead of the whole movie, he did certain shots where Sam took over the bulk of it. And that was much better because Sam is a Star Trek fan, and Sam knows every detail of Star Trek. So when I got in there with him for the first time ever, I could say just a few words and he knew exactly what I meant. So you don't have to describe what a phaser looks like. He already knows. That saved us forever, and that cut down the time a lot. Sam came in, and he started working on it, and we collaborated, and it was fast. I mean, he got the whole movie, 97 shots, I believe, in, 5 months, 4 or 5 months?
Wow.
So,
you know, I think Ken contributed something at a very essential point where we were getting down to a point where we were just going to release it. And really it wasn't to the standard of what we expected and what we put into the actual production part of it. And then we get into post-production and be 3+ years into it and still struggling and making a decision to release it. I think Ken came at an essential point, or Kenny talked to Ken at an essential point where it made us step back and say, okay, hold on, we can do better than this. And and then from there we adopted the storyline of Captain April and the Enterprise. I mean, his first mission with the Enterprise was a 5-year mission. So this turned into a 5-year mission for us.
Right on. Film. Followed suit. It fell right into Star Trek.
Yeah, we were actually 5 years ago today, we were filming and we wrapped up. Or actually, we were just about to start filming. We started filming on the 49th anniversary on September 8th of 2015.
So, yeah, this literally has been a 5-year mission. Your first day of filming was September 8th, 5 years ago, and you're coming out September 8th of 2020. That's amazing.
And so we're going to adopt it. That is what really this was all about. It was the 5-year mission of making this.
Yeah, we planned it. We planned it the whole time. Yeah. We know what we're doing.
Along with my wife, Morgan Fairchild. Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what we're going to say from here on out.
But I think what's essential, where I was getting with that, is that you asked the question, what happened a year and a half ago? Why didn't we release? In all reality, we were about to, but we were going to release something that, in the back of my mind as a filmmaker, I would have been like, okay, we just didn't hit the mark. We fell short of what we were intending to do.
They were basically two-dimensional animatics that I had learned to do over the time, but I'm no visual effects artist. I'm certainly not. And so these two-dimensional images are going across the screen, and you can tell what it's meant to be, but still in your mind you're like, well, yeah, so it's not.
Yeah, it kind of looks a little bit like the old claymation animations, the stuff in the background where you see Santa's sleigh flying across the screen, and it's just a two-dimensional cutout going across the sky.
And you know what? I will release that version one day for the fans to see what, silliness. It's for the fun of it. I will let them see what I had done. But, not first. I didn't want that to be the first impression. We get to see this movie the first time once. And if that's what you saw, we were hoping for something better for them. And so that's why we waited. And it was the hardest thing in the world to wait, trust me. But I know that the fans were looking forward to it. They knew about it.
If you think it was hard for you, imagine how hard it was for Sam doing 97 shots in 5 months.
Sam had his own little cave, I'm sure. He was in there just working feverishly. I don't think he slept. So.
Well, I talk to Sam every so often. He's working on a lot of projects. He's doing work on Yorktown, A Time to Heal. He works on the Avalon fan films. He's got his own stuff. He's doing Convergence. He did stuff for Intrepid. I mean, it's staggering. So every so often, I'll actually ask him how all these things are going. So what project are you working on this week, Sam? And usually the answer is like 3 or 4 different ones.
I would like to thank Sam out loud. What he did was he put us at the forefront of a lot of his work because he knew our deadline was coming, and he got it done. So Sam Cockings, my man.
Sam Cockings, my Brit.
My man. My Brit.
I'm not Brit. My main Brit. The other day I was talking to Sam because I always come up with a different nickname for him. If you go back to Fan Film Factory, just go and search for Samuel Cockings, and then like every time, the first time you'll ever see me mention Samuel Cockings in the blog, you'll always see some nickname for him, the blank of Star Trek fan films. And so I was talking to him the other day, I said, you're the Keatsat Satarak of Star Trek fan films. And he had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. Somebody could have read Dune by Frank Herbert. I explained to the Keatsat Satarak is something that could be in all places at the same time. Basically the Flash in science fiction.
He is the Flash.
He is totally the Flash. So
he not only had some good visual effects that he created, but he envisioned some of those effects. He took something that my animatics were as good as I could make them, and he took those. But he had some ideas for Star Trek to add to them, some extra ships here. And I think he actually designed a few, like an NX refit from Enterprise, where it would be a little bit upgraded by our time, and he has one flying in the background, kind of his own concept. So there's some things that he was able to add to Star Trek. And I didn't stand in his way at all, because if he has a good idea, it's going in. That's the way it should be. I think he was happy with the ability to do that. He was able to have so much input, but I trusted him. He got my trust right away. So
now, talking about 5 years is a great segue, because what I like to do on these interviews is tell the story of getting from there to here. And obviously, 2015 is when you started shooting, but I know that the origin of First Frontier goes back even further than that. So, Kenny, when did First Frontier first become the gestation of an idea?
It's hard to narrow it down to the exact moment, but I believe it was around 2006. There was a fan film that somebody released, and I had never heard of fan films. The internet was still, YouTube was new, I think. It was a little bit old, but it was coming around. And I saw this fan film where these creative people, they had made a panel in the hallway from the Enterprise. Like, they didn't have enough money to build the bridge or to build sick bay or anything like that, but they had one station with a communications panel on it. And that was the center of the entire movie, because that was the only set they had. And, that CG wasn't much yet. Nobody could do CG yet. So that's what they had. And they stuck to that panel, and they did all their action right there on that panel. And I thought, I would love to make my own Star Trek movie. Is that possible? And then I was in film school at the time, and I was like, well, maybe I will. And I thought about it, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to do one, it's going to be what I like. And what I wanted to always see was the initial launching of the Enterprise, and I wanted to see Captain Robert April. I've never seen him. Captain Pike, everybody knows. But Robert April, many people don't even know that he was the first captain of this Enterprise. And so it hit me right then to start writing, and that's when I started writing. And I wrote the worst script you'll ever read, called Star Trek First Frontier, USS Enterprise. I was going to hopefully make it a series, and this was episode 1, called USS Enterprise. And I was a new writer, so what I wrote about mostly was the technical Star Trek fun fan stuff. Like, I'd name all the phasers and photons firing and all this, but it didn't have that character story. I didn't know how to write people. And that's what I've learned since then. One of the things I've learned since then is the importance of the people in the story. As a matter of fact, over everything else. So everything else just takes background. So it was really boring, and I made it, and we drew storyboards for it, and I just didn't have any money. I grew up pretty poor, and we didn't have much at that time. I hadn't started my business yet. And so everything that was going to be spent on it was from me, and I didn't have anything. So it pretty much just got shelved for about 10 years, and it really did stay there. I would think about it here and there as I would go along, and I'd try to allocate a little bit of my money into a little savings. And I thought, maybe I can shoot it for $5,000. Maybe I could shoot the whole thing. That was, boy, naive. Whew.
I know some people are like, yeah, you should be able to do a fan film for $5,000. I recently did a fan film for $20,000, and we only just barely made it. Like, oh my God,
it's
the price
insane.
goes up
really
so quickly.
The thing that I guess that cost the most was, I don't know, it wasn't the post-production. It was more the sets and everything to make it look real. The more we did on screen practically, the less we had to do later for visual effects. But we got to the point where I was ready to make this movie, but I didn't know how. And then I started my company, and I started specifically to become a director. I knew that in actors or in Hollywood, there's thousands of people trying to get the same role. Same with directors. They're all trying to get directors' jobs. So I thought, rather than just go try for stuff, I'm going to actually make the movie and try to find that backdoor way into filmmaking, meet the right people. And it worked. That's exactly what happened. When I started the company, I did Vampire Diaries conventions eventually. And one of the stars of Vampire Diaries was Robert Prauga, who plays Captain April for us. And Robert Prauga was Zeke's business partner. So as a guest at my conventions, Robert Prauga would ask us for tickets for his friends, and Zeke is the one that would show up with his family. and I'd always screw up his tickets every time. So Zeke and I had a friendship based on his not having tickets ready for him when he got there, and me having to run and scramble and make them real quick. I looked probably pretty inept at that point. But Zeke and I became friends, and that's when we started talking. Zeke might remember more, but that's when we started talking. We had our little meeting, and I had told Robert Prowgo I want to do a Star Trek film, and I need your help. And Prowgo went to Zeke, and Zeke came to me at the convention and said, hey, I heard you wanted to make a film. And that one meeting right there, that one sentence from him, got us to where we are right now.
Now, what year was that you guys had your three-way meeting at that convention?
That had to be 2011, 2012?
No. It was 2013, probably.
13. It was just after that because I did my first Vampire Diaries 2011, and this would, you're right. It's probably about a year and a half, two later. 2013.
You got to screw up Zeke's ticket a couple of times, for him to.
I still have some of his tickets that I found after the convention. I don't know where they were during the convention. But.
Actually, it started off. Kenny first talked to me about it, and he gave me a copy of the script after the first conversation. And actually, it was just Kenny and I. Rob had told me about it, and then I had just met with Kenny at the convention. It was just him and I talking about it. And he
Rob didn't come to that meeting, right?
Yeah, Rob had mentioned he was the conduit about the conversation about wanting to make the movie, but then Kenny and I sat down and we talked about it. And he gave me a copy of the script, and then, I don't know, it was maybe a month went by, and finally we talked again about it. And I wasn't on board, not because I didn't want to make a movie with Kenny or anything else, but I just didn't feel like I was the right producer for this. First of all, most of the films I'd produced are all indie films. Even though we produce stuff that goes to the market for sale, it's still indie titles, something from $100,000 to $500,000, maybe $1 million film at the top end that our indie film company produces or does distribution on. And I said, I watched Star Trek some when I was a kid, but I'm not really a Star Trek fan. I've never done a film that is sci-fi with this much intense visual effects. I just don't know if I'm the right person for it. And it probably took about a year for me to get committed on, and I don't know really where that turning point of the commitment came. But I told Kenny from the beginning, I said, I can make everything happen from the production standpoint. We can build the sets, we can make the costumes, we can have the crews here to film it. We can go through all that, but the visual effects is where I'm going to be lacking. And Kenny had a friendship with somebody else who did visual effects, Lee Stringer, who had committed. And I was very hesitant because I knew how much would be hindering on the visual effects on this film.
That's right. All of it. When it got to that point, there's nowhere else it could go.
Yeah, once we wrapped principal photography and we've got all the actors shot on the sets, we've got to make all the rest of this come together, not on the post-production end of editing normally, but from the visual effects side, where we have all the green panels, where we have all the exteriors, where we knew we were going to have to do a lot of CG, but we wanted to keep the Enterprise with the model that we shot. So we reduced some of the CG or visual effects that we would need. But I was still very leery to have that much weight hanging in something that I didn't have means to get us to completion if this relationship with Lee Stringer didn't work out. So to make me feel a little bit better, I flew down to Florida when Lee was coming into the United States to meet with him, and I met with him in Orlando. And I had him sit right in front of me and tell me, yes, I'm going to do this. And I was like, okay, Kenny. I had the sidebar conversation with Kenny, and I was like, Kenny, if we get to this point and he doesn't do what he said he's going to do, we're going to have a real problem. And that's exactly what happened. Lee just totally bailed on him.
Right.
And that's where it turned into...
Yeah, I know.
That's where it turned into a 5-year mission. We had to...
Right, it was a 1-year mission before that.
It was, how do we complete this film? How do we have something that we put a solid year's worth of work into when you talk about starting from pre-production, building sets, building costumes, actual principal photography, going through and putting together the first initial assembly of the film and completing the first edit or the first cut of it was about a 1-year time from April 2015 to April 2016. To have a solid year's worth of work put into it and then really just be hanging around for this guy that keeps stringing Kenny along.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Chris' name is Stringer, so
String.
that should have been
Exactly.
I should have seen it coming. It was foreshadowed.
It was right there in his last name, foreshadowed, wasn't it?
It was. But, I mean, and you know what?
How did I not see that coming?
I mean, I know. Yeah.
Let me interrupt for just a quick second, because I never actually said what your two roles were on this. Now, obviously, Kenny was the writer, and Kenny also wanted to be the director. And you, Zeke, are the producer. Now, a lot of people who are listening to this interview have no idea what that means. I mean, they sort of know that the director is the guy who yells cut and action and all that sort of stuff, but what does a producer do, Zeke? When Kenny asked you to produce this, what did that mean?
Well, first of all, in indie filmmaking, producers or everybody wears multiple hats. So it means a lot of different things, not only producer or director or any of those. But essentially what producer means is the person that takes the story, we develop it, turn it into a script that's a foundation that's going to be the foundation of the entire production. So we took what Kenny described earlier as his script that was not where it needed to be for ready to be filmed, and we brought in some writers that I trust and I work with that I know that are good storytellers, and we came in and worked and doctored the script up. We stayed with Kenny's essential story, or absolute story, not essential story, but we just turned it into where we had more characters in there. We had arcs in there. We had people that people could relate to and attach to, other than just Kenny's script was more of a concept script. This is what I want to write a story about. It's about Robert April and his wife. They're the first captains of the Enterprise, and this story has really never been told. It was mentioned in one of the animated series in the 70s, but they never really talked about this story. So we stayed with that, but then we turned Robert April into a real person instead of just the real quick glimpse that everybody knows that he's the first captain of the Enterprise. We had to turn him into a real person. What was happening in his life at the moment that the Enterprise was being built? Who was his wife? What was their relationship? So we had to make those pieces happen and put that script together. And so the producer's role starts from taking the story, developing the story, and then building the machine to make the film, which is bringing all the different parts in, the construction people to build the sets, the wardrobe people to sew the...
He did all of that, and I didn't have to do any of that. He did all of the work of organizing the team.
So basically what he did is he hired all the chefs, and he got all of the ingredients to make the food.
Right, and I gave him the recipe.
And all you did basically was go to the buffet table and just start eating everything, and you just assembled everything onto the plate. Is that right, Kenny?
That's exactly right. That's right. That's exactly what happened.
That is what a producer does.
Zeke came in, and because of that, I didn't know what a producer did before this. I had heard it, but after seeing what Zeke does, it's not a job I would want to do. He handles a lot of the stress and shelters me from it. That's what his role has been, and he's been perfect at it.
So it takes it from concept to delivery, and that's what we're doing now. That's where we're down to the wire. That's where I'm in the ball game. I'm sitting here working with the final mix right now.
Once again, he's stressed, and I don't have to be so much. You know, he's in there stressing out, and because it's down to the last minute for him. For me, I'm really just there to let him know if there's something Star Trek-y that needs to be changed around or something. But other than that, it's all on his shoulders. So he's still in there doing it.
So one of the things I know that a producer has to do is figure out the budget, along with a line producer, who's the specific person who figures out the budget. But the producer, the executive producer, is the overall, okay, we're going to need to raise this much money in order to do what we need to do. And I know that back in, I guess it was 2015, right, you did a Kickstarter, Kenny, one of the early Kickstarters. You were trying to raise like $130,000, I think, and you got
That's what we thought it would cost us.
Yeah, I will ask you at some point soon what it actually ended up costing you. But before that, so $130,000 was your goal. And as we know, Kickstarter, if you don't make it to your goal, you get nothing. You raised about $30,000, got, I think, about halfway into it. And I guess you figured you're not going to make it to $130,000, and you just shut the whole thing down.
Yeah, why embarrass myself? If I'm not going to make it anyway, I might as well end it and say I meant to end it, and I'm going to pay for it myself instead. I didn't want to do that. I mean, obviously, I have a family. We've never been rich, and we finally had a little bit of money from the conventions. But if I could have some help from the Kickstarter or whatever, it would have been beautiful. But the problem with Kickstarter was that I didn't have anything to show anybody. So when I put it up there, it was just words. And if maybe there are fans who believe in what you're saying, but I didn't have any imagery. I didn't have any video footage to show them, any shots to show them. And then the questions that were coming were, can I read the script ahead of time? Where are you going to be shooting? And can my daughter play this role if I donate? Things I couldn't do. I didn't even have access to any of that information, and I certainly couldn't give them the script, what was going on in the story. So I was apparent right away that I wasn't going to make the $130,000 from it, not because people wouldn't want to see it or because it was crappy, but because they didn't know what it was, and there was no way for me to accurately get that information to them, to let them know what it was going to be. But this dream in my head looks like this, and I'm trying to get it to you. But, when you see it on paper, it doesn't look like that. So the donations were slow at first. And so I just decided, well, if we're doing well with the company, which we were, we had just started a One Tree Hill convention, and it was doing super well for us. We were the first in the world, and it came together. So the finances were there. And I said, well, okay, it might drain us down to nothing, but, somebody asked me why I did this, and because it really did drain us down to nothing for a long time. And I said, well, because if I had the ability to make this movie, and I didn't make it, if it's right in front of me and I don't make it for fear of something, the cost would be my soul. You know what I mean? It's going to cost me more eventually because I would regret it for the rest of my life. So I said, okay, well, money can come back. We'll just go broke and we'll make the movie, and let's go ahead and do it. And so that's why we were able to do it with the convention doing well. And my mom helped too. She became an executive producer, and she helped us out a little bit. And that's where we got where we are. Once we got the funding, and then Zeke took that. You're right about the funding. The producer takes that and he allocates it to where it needs to go to get the film made. And he was doing that for me also, so that I didn't have any of that stress. Other than when we'd run out of money and we'd get that little meeting every now and then. I don't know what I got to do, man. I'm going to fire half the team if you don't, whatever it was. And I'll be like, okay, Zeke, we got to keep them. Have to come up with a little bit more to keep it going. Other than that, though, we got it done. Zeke handled the money really well. He got the best team we could possibly hope for the lowest price. And I think a lot of it was due to them hearing the title Star Trek. Everybody has an experience. They know it from somewhere. Everybody knows who Mr. Spock is, even if they've never watched an episode. To have
Although you don't have Mr. Spock in your fan film.
No, I don't have Spock in mine. No.
But I'm going to ask the question now that everybody wants to know, which is, okay, you put $130,000 on your Kickstarter as a goal. How much do you think you ended up spending all told?
On this question, Zeke and I are going to have to collaborate because once it went to a certain point, he's keeping the records, but I think if I had to guess, it would be around $240,000.
We spent through principal photography. It was $153,500 when we wrapped up production. With probably had about $5,000 in reserves just for ancillary things that were going to happen through post-production. The $153,500 included through the first round of the assembly, sync, and the first edit. And then Kenny took over the edit from there once he had the film assembled and put together in a timeline. Mm-hmm. And then from that point, I was just supposed to be waiting for the visuals to be done, and then we would marry them together with Kenny's edit of the film. And we were hoping that we would be wrapping up, in the low 160 range because of the arrangements and things with Lee Stringer. And then I think we ended up having another about $5,000 or $7,000 in expenses when we did the model shoot at Universal Studios in Orlando. And that was, February 2016 when we shot the model?
2017.
Mm-hmm. But then from there, we started to stumble. And then there was some ways where we went some different directions with visual effects that were costing money that just never even made it into the film. So there was some unfortunate things there that I think cost us some.
But you have no choice. You have to try, because if you're sitting there doing nothing, so this little money that's going out, you're trying to find that person and hope that you're investing in the completion of the film. But what happens is it goes there and then nothing comes back and then that money was gone. And we're not talking about the endless, bottomless pit of money.
But the answer really is this is a $250,000 fan film.
Yes.
Wow.
That looks like a $10 million one, in my opinion.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. You know, even when I saw, a year and a half ago, I can't wait to see it on September 8th. These guys have not given me a sneak peek, by the way, not on the.
We're going to try. We're going to try tomorrow.
It's okay. I can wait 2 days as long as it's just 2 days.
If we had it, Jonathan, you would have it. Trust me.
No, we were already set on trajectory to release on the 8th.
Other than the fact that everyone will be at home and they'll have something new to finally watch, we'll give them something to do at home. And if they're Star Trek fans, and if it comes off the way I think it's going to, then I believe that it's going to be a gift that they really enjoy. I've tried to take myself out of the situation, try to look at it from the outside looking in as if I had never seen it before. And it's hard to do because I've seen it 10,000 times, but when I do, I get the goosebumps. They're everywhere. I think I was able to nail every spot that I would want as a fan without pulling in any things like pre-existing characters and stuff like that, other than Robert and Sarah. I wanted to steer away from all that. I wanted to rely on my story only and not have gimmicks, not have a lot of the original cast show up as their grandparents or something. You know what I mean? I just wanted it to be our story, and see if that succeeded. Then maybe next time you throw in something like that, the old stuff, the fan stuff. But there's plenty of it, and almost every scene in the movie has an Easter egg of some sort that I've placed that I could actually make a book of Easter eggs that are in there.
But you also have an opening monologue by Nichelle Nichols, so, there is that. How did you manage that one, by the way?
I knew I needed that opening monologue. If I weren't going to use the original series actors as characters, as on screen, because I didn't want, that gimmick, I still thought I needed the endorsement from an original series actor that everyone recognized. At the beginning of the movie, if someone could, it's a beautiful monologue, you've heard it, and it's over the universal crawl. Whether we talk about Star Trek, it's a journey. It's the universe. We start out on the journey to Earth in the beginning of the movie. And then we didn't have Nichelle at first. It was written for William Shatner. I thought if I could get him to do that opening monologue, and the first word out of his mouth is space, it's like Space, the Final Frontier almost. It almost catches you right away. So I'd hoped to use his voice. And Zeke and I chased him all over the United States, and he was always so busy, and he hadn't heard of it before. And he might need a little bit more credential before he lends his voice to something. So he was a little bit harder for us to find. But then Nichelle, she was doing a convention right next to where we lived. And Autumn, my wife, she looked at me and she said, why don't we do that? So she contacted her, Autumn did, and we got a response within a day. We want to do it. And so it was 2 days later we were at the convention. Zeke and me and my son and Autumn and then a few friends, we went in and we shot her in the room doing her monologue. And I'll tell you that, for me, I was directing a Star Trek star in a Star Trek movie. I mean, that's my dream as like a 16-year-old kid. You know what I mean? It was happening. And there she was. You know what? I think the forces of nature caused that to happen. Her voice is melodic.
Well, she sounds great.
She does.
Yeah. What year was that you recorded her?
That was 2017 also. It had to be the middle of the year. I didn't think it was at a convention in Tampa.
2017. Yeah, I'm trying to think what month. Listen, gentlemen, can I jump off this call and can Kenny finish
go
this
edit the movie. I'll take it over. I've carried you this far, Zeke.
Well, our colorist is calling me right now, and I need to find out what he's calling for. So
go do your thing. We knew you were going to
go ahead. Finish the movie, and if you want to come back after that, that's great. Otherwise, Kenny will finish up. I'm sure everybody will understand it. It's all worth it to have a good finished fan film when all is said and done.
I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, you've got to go do it. Go take care.
Jonathan, pleasure meeting you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, my friend, and Kenny will continue with you, but go off and finish your fan film.
Okay.
Yeah, go make the movie they're waiting for instead of talking.
Yep. Yeah. Let me go take care of the problems that I need to help solve this so everybody can see it on Tuesday.
So that I don't have to. Once again, no stress for me.
Exactly. An example of what a producer does. They have to get the things done.
Okay, I'll talk to y'all later.
Okay, bye, Zeke.
Thanks, Zeke. So actually, the director, Kenny, you did a lot of other things that the producer didn't. So why don't you talk a little bit about that? What have you done as a director on this?
Okay, so the director, what I've learned, on set, the director is protected by everyone. And the protection that they give him, it seems like a respect, like that's the director, but it's not. They're protecting him from stress so that the director can concentrate on the story that's in front of him, the actors, the performances that he's getting, to make sure that they match in his head almost what needs to go later into the edit. And they say that the editors, people who edit the films at the end, are the best directors because they know exactly what they need on set. And I see exactly what that means now. I know exactly if too much green screen is going to cost me a week in the chair, doing visual effects. If I can cut that down by a foot, I save myself a week. Now I know that, but then I didn't. But your question was what's different about this. I don't know, honestly, because this was my first film directing, and I did so much stuff with Zeke. We were making props. A week before the movie, Zeke was making a pad for the yeoman to carry, and we were making blasters and alien weapons and stuff like that. It was fun, but that's not usually the director.
The director doesn't usually become a prop maker or a set maker or whatever. Yeah. No. But in a fan film, you have to do a lot.
It's true, and that's because of budget. That's because of budget. If you have money, anybody can do anything. But when you don't, I think this is what is good about fan films, is they don't have the budget. If you look at movies that didn't have the money that did great, or like Star Wars, you know what I mean? If he'd have had $400 million, it might not have been the beautiful story it was. Exactly. You got the real version right then. That's true. And it would have been that. You see money come in. Well, who had money? Star Trek the Motion Picture. You know what I mean? When they had to get creative, you get Star Trek 2. Harv Bennett comes in and says, I can do 6 Star Trek movies for that much money. It's basically that. And so because we didn't have that budget, and because it was all coming from me, and I knew I didn't have a Kickstarter, I mostly relied on Zeke and his ability he called a lot of favors in. A lot of people came in and did things for him. He used those favors for me. But also, like I said, whenever he would mention Star Trek to a potential first AD or a cinematographer, their eyes would light up. They would take the minimum that they could take to work. For the SAG actors, we had a minimum we had to pay them. There's no way around it. They're not going to come for free. And these are real SAG actors. They're in the guild. We had to go through the guild to get permission, and then we had to follow their guidelines. And so my point is it got into the budget was what it was. It was all coming from me. So I had to do a lot of things that most people don't have to do. But I don't mind it because in this world, this was Star Trek. I mean, who doesn't want to sit down and make a laser rifle from, where no man's gone before? It was fun. Yeah. But other than the actual physical creation of things, I would just watch Zeke do a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. And once I knew what my budget was going to be and Zeke was able to take that, I was able to just fall into the role of directing. And I then had this dream come alive before me. But, there's a fear that goes with that because what if this goes away? I didn't want to get too excited about it because it could fall away from me, but it didn't. And here we are. I can't believe we're 2 days away from releasing this movie finally. It's been a heavy weight. And there were times where I was in the room by myself working on it, and I knew that if I stopped working, that nobody would be working on it. And, that just means nothing's happening. So I could never let myself stop. I had to keep going and going, and it paid off.
That's why I have you listed as the showrunner, by the way. A producer makes it all happen.
Yes.
A director makes it all happen in very different ways. But a showrunner really makes it all happen because the showrunner is the person that if he stops running, everybody else stops running.
That had to be me, yes.
Yeah. It's the person with the dream. It's the person who says, we are going to finish this no matter what. In a lot of fan films, there is a single person that is the showrunner. He is the general. And he may have a lot of colonels and majors and captains underneath him, or her.
Sure. Uh-huh.
But there's usually a showrunner. And, I think, Kenny, for you, this is your show to run. And I think it's a very important point you just made, that if you stopped working on it, everybody else would take their cue from you, and it would never have gotten made. So take a bow for this 5-year mission, my friend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. In this case, you just did mention that if the showrunner stops running, everybody else stops running. In this case, I had no everybody else. It really was just me. And so if I stop, there's nobody else to do anything anyway, and the movie just comes to a halt. There's nothing going. And as long as I was moving, as long as I was doing something, I knew that we were getting closer to the end, but it wasn't coming very fast at that point. It reminded me recently that it helps if the showrunner has a love for the product they're making. And I'm thinking more like along the new Star Trek series I think a lot of people are having trouble with. They don't feel like people are in charge that care about it like they should. I'm not going to talk about that because it's, each person likes their own thing, and maybe some people do like the new shows. But I do love Star Trek, is my point. And I've loved it my whole life. It's more than just a TV show that I liked growing up as a kid and I want to relive the nostalgia. It's not that. Star Trek has given me something, and it's hard to put my finger on what that is. Intelligence, maybe? I mean, I'm not trying to call myself smart, but I'm saying that I had a vocabulary that nobody else had when I was in school because of Star Trek. I knew what indigenous meant because of the con. You know what I mean? I went and looked these words up, and I found out what these things meant. And Star Trek gave me that. Overall, I believe that Star Trek gave society, you can't describe how much it's given. If you listen to an interview by Nichelle talking about her meeting Martin Luther King Jr., that's just one of millions of things that Star Trek has done for the world, where it's helped with racism and sex and bigotry, all this. Captain Kirk says, leave the bigotry right off the bridge, right there.
My friend became a nurse because of Dr. McCoy,
you know that story?
People who became engineers because of Scotty. This was just one Canadian actor, James Doohan, doing a bad Scottish accent, but he was fixing everything, and, he couldn't change the laws of physics, and people were inspired to become that fix-it person or become that doctor or become that scientist. Yeah, in Star Trek, I don't think the world has ever seen anything that has been as effectual on the world, has affected so many people as Star Trek over 5 decades. So, yeah, absolutely, I agree with you.
I've heard that story 1,000 times. As I'm going along here and I'm showing my friends the movie or people I don't know, sometimes I'm talking about it. The number one story I always get is I watched Star Trek when I was growing up with my dad. It's always I watched Star Trek with my dad. And I don't know what the dad part has to do with it, but I know the timing of it. It's like it's in the afternoon. And if you remember back in the 70s and early 80s, we only had 3 or 4 channels. And one channel had Star Trek on it, and the rest were probably news. And if you didn't want to watch news, you got Star Trek. So people are starting to watch it. And they've got these memories with their parents, but mostly dads. Almost always with their dad, they'd watch Star Trek. And then if the show is inspirational, and Star Trek was, you're inspired to go do something. And people wanted to do things that they had seen and loved. Like you just said, the engineers and the lawyers. And Star Trek has done that for us as society. And I feel like we owe it something more than just something for money. I think that Star Trek is worth cherishing and preserving. And so I guess you would call me a Star Trek purist, because I definitely love to keep continuity the same. But then I'm also open to new ideas, as long as it doesn't change the fundamental idea of Star Trek, which I believe would be space exploration for our future, plus inclusion for us here right now, the ability to get along as a people. And I think if we ever can do that, we'll get to space. They're waiting for first contact. They just need us to all be able to get along first, because why would we go out there fighting?
Yeah, I think we got our own prime directive here on Earth. People are leaving us alone.
True.
Let me stare us back to directing for just a moment. So when you were first directing the shoot, you had real actors. Rob Pralgo, he was on Vampire Diaries. He was on Watchmen, by the way. I was recently watching Watchmen. And
he shows up everywhere.
It was the 3rd episode, and there's like this old farmer or whatever, and I'm looking like, holy crap, that's Robert April.
It is.
Because I don't watch Vampire Diaries, but I just know him from your Facebook. But it was really, really cool to see him there. But anyway, so you've got a bunch of real actors, SAG actors.
All of them.
Who have come onto your set, and it's your set. You are the director.
Man, that moment.
You walked onto the set for the first day, and what was going through your mind? How much had you prepared, and then what did you do?
Okay, they finished the sets a few days before we started shooting. And we were so busy, you know how it gets where you're doing 10,000 things at once. And I would have, very occasionally, I could take a moment and go, wow, this is it. But there was a moment that came just before we started shooting principal photography. And I walked out on the bridge, and I was by myself. Everybody had gone home. It was for the night when it closed up. And I was by myself. And I looked around, and I said, oh, my gosh, I almost feel like I could actually be there. Maybe there was an episode where Kirk was the only one on the ship. I kind of pretended I was him for a minute. There's nobody else here. If I had the Enterprise, it was a dream come true, and I was worried that I was going to fail. And that fear was there, but that's a constant nagging fear. That's just one that keeps you in order. It's not one that stopped me, but it definitely, I had never directed before. Here I am. It may be a Star Trek set, and I may know all the Star Trek stuff that the others don't know, but these are real. They wasn't just real actors. It was a real crew. And Atlanta is the new Hollywood. And everyone that we hired are people that are working on other movies. The person who did our set decoration was working on The Avengers during the day, and then he would come to us at night. And he brought some of the props. Actually, there's a big blue prop in Robert April's quarters that he brought from Thor. Actually, I think it was from Thor, and it's prominent. You can see it there. But those are the kinds. These people were professionals, and I was new. One thing that comes to mind is the first time that I called action was really exciting. But about halfway through the first day, I called cut at the wrong time. And the whole production, it felt like the earth was going to cave in. I heard people yelling in the back, I heard cut, and I was like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. So from that moment on, I made sure where the last word was before I called cut. It was the one mistake I made as a director, but it wasn't that big of a mistake, but it was embarrassing for me. But, you know, these people are professionals, and you want to keep it going. And the actors were the same. And you had mentioned that they were all SAG. They are. It was even more than that. It was I had, through One Tree Hill, I had met Barry Corbin. And he played Coach Whitey on One Tree Hill. He's the mentor of the show. And so through my relationship with him, I was able to get him to come onto the film. And he filled a role that I didn't realize that was there. It's something that I hadn't thought of before. And that is, in a lot of movies, almost all of them, you can find that the character, if it's a character's journey, they have a wise mentor that helps them along that journey. And usually in the film, the wise mentor is the most famous person in the movie. And if you look at, like, Karate Kid was Mr. Miyagi, Rocky was Mickey, you know, and then Star Wars was Obi-Wan. Alec Guinness, he obviously was the most famous person there. It goes on and on. Halloween had Dr. Loomis. You didn't really know anybody else. The wise old mentor that gets the hero to the end of the journey is the most famous person in the movie. And here is Barry Corbin, who's the most famous. Everybody knows him. They might not know his name, but the people I've shown it to have all said, oh, I know who he is, instantly. So that worked out in our favor, and I think it added to that mythos, the hero's journey. I think we kind of captured that without even trying. I didn't know much about the hero's journey and Joseph Campbell. I've read a lot of that now, but I didn't know much then. And so we got some prominent actors. Paul Telfer's on he's on Days of Our Lives, I believe, every day. And then he plays our security chief. And there's also the fact that some of these, it's been 5 years, so some of the actors have actually gone on to do bigger things. Mark Ashworth is a DC character now in Stargirl, and he plays our engineer. Yeah, those kind of things are cool for me to see them succeeding after the film. But
now, how did you get the performances that you wanted out of these folks? I mean, because obviously they're all trained actors. Were you just like, you know, hey guys, I trust you, figure out how to do this? Or were you really trying to draw out the scene the way you wanted it played? And if so, how did you do that?
These were, like I said, they were professional actors. Robert Prowdo studied his script for 6 months before we walked in. He didn't need a script. It was in his head, and he could do everything perfectly according to what he had come up with. They were all open to direction, but for the most part, these characters were undefined, so even I was still looking for the character. And I think that the best on-screen representation of a character is when a little bit of the actor's in it, too. And since I didn't know the actors yet, I kind of had to wait and kind of look at, you know, meet them and get to know them a little bit before we went on set. But once they started acting out the roles, they almost did it themselves. It was almost automatic. I know Robert Prowdo was. He was Robert April instantly. And Sarah is played by Tara Oakes. It was interesting. During her casting, she was reading a line for Sarah, and she was speaking on the intercom. And at the end of the line, she says, April out. When we finished, she reached up and she tapped her chest. And I said, that's a Next Generation fan. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the communicator, she said, April out, and she tapped her chest. We're not Next Generation, so she did that on her own. And I knew, well, she's a Star Trek fan. So she brought that in with her, and she gave the performance of, I thought she was one of the best in the film. Perfect. And then the other actors did. For instance, Lyra, the Andorian, she invented this standing with her hands held together as her everyday, whenever she's resting, she has her hands together in front of her. And she did that every time, and that was all her. It was just these little magical moments coming from the actors. But then, you know, when we were trying to get to a certain story, they would trust my guidance. But I also had a helper who was helping me. His name was Keith Brooks, and he had directed films for Sundance. And he was giving me the ins and outs. They knew him also from previous, so they had worked before, most of the people. It's just a meshing of everyone's ideas into what became what you see on screen. And I remember Paul Telfer as McCain. He came up to me the first day, and he said, I never asked you. He has I can't remember where he's from, but he has an accent from somewhere. And he said, what accent do you want me to use with this thing? And at that moment, I could have said anything, you know, but I said, you know what, just go with your own. I mean, why would I change it? You know, and he did, and it's great. You know, it's him, actually, and he liked that because he didn't have to change anything. But I remember that moment on set where this is a person coming up to you, asking you what the future of this character is going to be, and right now on your words, it's going to change forever. That's fun. It's fun for me, but it's heavy, too. It's also like, I don't want to mess that up. What if I pick a crazy accent and nobody likes it? You know, so moments like that, it was definitely collaborative, and everybody kind of already knows Star Trek. So it was easier than I think it would have been had nobody known anything about the feel. And the original series was prominent in everyone's most of our actors are a little bit older in the film, so they had seen the original series, and they knew what the flavor was we were looking for, and they got it.
Well, Kenny, I have to say that this is a magical moment for you. It's a magical moment for Star Trek fandom to be able to see this 5-year project. Now, I understand that you're breaking most of the rules of the guidelines, but I think your philosophy here is we started working on this a good year and a half before the guidelines were even announced, so we're grandfathered in. I'm assuming that if CBS were to say, take this down, you'd say, sure.
Yeah, we're not going to break laws. When we went into this, we looked into the laws of it, and the general rule was, as long as you're not making money off of it, the fans are allowed to have an outlet. That was the way it was seen before, and fan films were happening, like Star Trek Continues was in and all the others. And so we followed suit with them. We were just going to do what they did, make our little film, put it out. So the guidelines weren't there yet. It felt like we were still shooting when those guidelines came, but we were finished when they came. It was just after, and they were very restrictive. You know, I made this film for me. Like, if I were going to watch it myself forever, what would I want to see? And if it didn't have Uhura in it, that's Uhura. You know, if it didn't have phasers in it, how could I make it without the Enterprise insignia? How could it? You have to remove all those things, don't you?
Oh, yeah, no, I don't think you could. Yeah. I mean, they tried to do it with Renegades, and, it was a mess. I mean, they tried hard, but whenever I watch Renegades, the Requiem, where they de-Trekified it, I always just mentally, I make Robert Beltran into Chakotay.
You have to, and I don't want to do that.
Into Nog. So you don't have to do that. But let me ask you one final question.
Sure.
So now that you're done, it's only taking you 5 quick years, are you going to be making a sequel? Because, I mean, it ended with this really, really awesome kind of cliffhanger with your Andorian character. I'm not going to give anything away in case people haven't watched it yet, but are you planning on making a sequel? Obviously, then you would probably follow the guidelines, I'm guessing, except that you would have to be using Robert Prago again, and he's professional, so I have no idea. Are you going to be making a sequel, and if so, is Rob Prago going to be in it, and what's the plan?
Well, okay, I do want to make a sequel, obviously. I love Star Trek. As a matter of fact, if people liked it enough, I would devote my entire life to Star Trek if I could help in any way. So I would make 100 sequels if I can until I die. But I don't know who would be in it, obviously, because, we haven't even started that. But Robert Prago would probably be a pretty good bet because he's business partners with Zeke. And, he's always available to us, and he's a good friend. And I believe he would do it. I think most of the cast would. So, yes, I want to make a sequel. At the end of this film, you'll see in the end of the credits, there's a little nod to that. So I'll leave that as a little surprise. But, yes, so the answer is yes.
Something I haven't seen yet. And this time you can crowdfund it because I think after you, have this to show people, it's like, hey, look, I did this. Give me more money. I'll do it again.
In a nicer way than that. Yeah, this one that we did in good faith. It did take away Christmas from my son a couple of times. Things like that.
Oh,
but, we made it. It really did. I'm not just making that up.
Film. Shame on you.
What was I thinking? I told him the movie is the Christmas present, but he's just not going to get it for a while. So,
how old is your son?
But he is 18 now, and he just graduated in the COVID world, online graduation.
So, he was just a teenager when you took Christmas away from him.
A couple of times. He was old enough to not make me feel guilty about it. He wasn't a small little kid that, I felt really bad, but he understood that we're chasing a dream. We're chasing Dad's dream, and there's always going to be this time period in his life where Dad was making that Star Trek movie. And, and I've asked him, are you going to remember that time? And he said yes. So he's an integral part of it. But, yeah, we did do that, and it was a little bit difficult. So to actually have the funding now to do it without having to rely on myself to do it, that's what I hope to do. We could probably make magic.
And you still have those sets because those are now sitting in Airy Studios. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They're there. We might use those again. I'm not sure. We might actually rebuild because they were built as best as they could on the budget we had. And they made it through that one shoot, but they weren't meant to last much longer than that. Kind of like I think the original series sets.
They look a little flimsy. And I've been on the Ares set for Axanar, and that thing is built to survive like a hurricane.
It's gorgeous. It's definitely it's like an attraction.
Solid.
Hey, gentlemen, I'm back with y'all now. I had to go.
Oh,
okay. Well, we're saying goodbye.
We're just about to finish up, my friend, but...
Hey, enough time to come and say goodbye.
Yeah, enough time to say goodbye. Well, let me ask you, Zeke, are there any other things that you want to say to the fans, any messages, any final thoughts on First Frontier you want to share?
Well, I hope the audience will enjoy this film, will accept it. We've definitely had somebody that knows Star Trek front and back leading the way, and that's Kenny.
Thanks.
And, I've relied on him a lot. You've got to fill a certain space for the fans that truly love Star Trek. And Kenny was the leader of that and did a great job. So I think to see somebody who loves Star Trek so much really say that we hit all the cylinders with this film in the sense of what Star Trek is about, I hope that that's how the audience accepts it. So we look forward to showing them, I guess, a little over 48 hours from now.
Or when they listen to it about possibly 48 hours ago, depending on how long it's
exactly.
Andy, how about you? Any final words for your fans, your viewers?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, thanks to Zeke. That was very nice. And I do take that mantle seriously. It matters to me that the story is told correctly. If it's not original Star Trek, if it doesn't have the flavor, the ingredients all have to be there, then it won't hit the way that I hope they did. And I think we did do it. But like Zeke said, it was 100% me. And whenever decisions were going to be made on whether to go this direction or that direction, I would look into my Star Trek and pull it from me and see which way we should go. So if it fails, it's because I didn't know Star Trek very well. But I think I do, and I think I got it. And I want to tell the fans, thank you for watching it. I just wanted to take us back one time. It's been so long since I've had that feeling of the original series. There's something about it, and it's hard to put your words on it, but it's something about the Star Trek, the way it used to be, and it still has some of that now, but it was pure before, and I miss it. And so we were trying to take a journey back one time, and hopefully you see some green screen here or there that we may have missed, or if you see some wiggly lines that shouldn't be there because of bad editing, we tried our best, and I think we got most of it. And hopefully they can just immerse themselves and enjoy the film. And thank you for watching. That's what I'd like to say to them.
And yeah, if you find any little glitches, just
that's all Zeke. It's not me. It's LT.
It's not it. Blame the producer. The editor.
Yeah, no. There's a lot of crazy things that I learned about Star Trek: The Original Series that I did.
Zeke's a fan now.
And our production fell into so many of the same things that when they were filming the original series.
That's
right. We were really running on a shoestring budget to pull off this type of production. I mean, yeah, we could have done a fan film for a lot less money, but it wouldn't have been the production that we pulled off. It would have been a totally different thing, kind of similar to what Kenny gave you the example earlier. So to pull off this, I mean, I say all that earlier, but I do know that we've told a story and you can compare it and look at the similarities and say, this is original series Star Trek. It's in that vein. So
hopefully we got it.
I hope that everybody else sees it the same way.
Oh, I'm sure they will. And I'd like to, remind people and remind you guys of the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which is basically the imperfection is what makes something unique, is what makes something artwork. Making it perfect makes it imperfect, and making it imperfect makes it perfect. So on that happy note, gentlemen, go back, finish your fan film. I'm going to watch it when it comes out. Everybody's going to watch it when it comes out. We're going to love it. Thank you for your time today. Best of luck and congratulations.
Thank you, Jonathan. Talk to you soon.